everything which you do in a startup is an experiment, right? In fact, the startup itself is an experiment.
All right, we're here with another episode of Backstage with Millionaires. I'm Caleb, your host. And today we've got Matthew on the show. He's the founder of Typito. They started the company back in 2016. What were those days like?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me, Caleb.
For sure.
Yeah, I would love to share my story. And so like you said, we started in 2016. And to give you some context about what Typito is essentially a video creation tool used by marketers and marketing professionals, marketing agencies. And the intent here is to basically make it super easy for them to create really good looking video stories and then publish it on social media. So that's essentially what we are providing as a tool.
How did you discover this problem in the first place?
So I would say there are quite a few different data points or events which kind of converged together and then let us start working on Typito. So one of the things is that 2016 was a year when Facebook video was going bonkers. Everyone started speculating that hey, video is going to be the next big content delivery format on the internet. And we saw that consumer video was getting really popular, right? YouTube, Facebook, and it's still, the trend is still going on. We have got TikTok and Instagram, all of them really doing well with videos. But what we also kind of hypothesized that time is the fact that, hey, consumer videos are going great. There would be a time eventually where businesses are going to adopt videos. So can we be there at that time in the market, being an alternative or being an option for businesses to start creating videos really fast? So that's what we wanted to kind of go after. And adding to that, we also noticed that a lot of these videos which are getting published on social media had text on them. You can call it typography or text animations or whatnot. So we thought, hey, text is really helping people understand the intent of the video much better, and it's giving much more context to the audience. So can we just focus on that problem? Can we just make it super easy for someone who is not well versed with a tool like Adobe After Effects, which in itself is amazing, but probably super difficult for a newcomer or a noob to basically create videos, because it'll probably take you like a few months to master something like that, to understand how to create motion graphics on a tool like Adobe After Effects. So we thought, hey, we can't be Adobe After Effects for sure, but can we enable all these newcomers who are coming into marketing, who are coming into any sort of digital storytelling, can we help them create videos which look really like amazing with the help of professional motion graphics, which can be dragged and dropped and customized as per their brand compliance and whatnot. So that's the story we kind of went after. And
you identified this problem. You saw that there was going to be a need if there wasn't already. What came after that? You theoretically you understand what the problem is that you're trying to solve, but like obviously going from 0 to 1 is a huge process, right? So what happened?
What ended up happening is that I talked to one of my good friends from college who was an engineer with Adobe at that time, and he kind of joined in. His name is Srijit. So Srijit and I started working on Typito by around mid 2016. We had some clarity on what we wanted to build. I would say it was very hazy, I would say.
But you guys were dedicated to the startup at this point.
That's true.
You had walked away from your previous jobs, and
absolutely. In fact, by end of 2015, I had already left my previous job, and I was like figuring out what to do. Eventually, I think 2016, by mid of it, we were like, both of us were in full swing. We got into Typito and we started prototyping the product, and that's how the journey started, and it's been amazing since then.
Just hearing you say that though, everything's been great. I think you and I both know that, like, you look back and you're saying that it looks great. It's been a great journey because there's been a lot of learnings along the way. You've grown so much as an entrepreneur. The company is now doing well. But I think, if I put you in a time machine and sent you back like 1 year ago, you'd probably be, transported to a time when things were going terribly, right? And you're like having so many doubts and you're struggling and you're like, that's the story of entrepreneurship, right? Everybody is going through that. So
Yeah.
what was maybe the first negative, not negative, but what was the first challenge for you guys? The first really difficult moment or learning that you had to sort of internalize?
Yeah, I think first of all, I agree with your statement there, right? I mean, you put me 2 or 3 years back, I would be like, yeah, that would have been. I'm sure it would have been a very, very difficult situation. But yeah, so here's the thing, right? I think we had quite a few challenges which we were facing because both of us were first-time entrepreneurs and we haven't been through this gig before, right? So three things come to my mind actually. So one of them is the fact that we were not sure whom we were building the product for, right? We were still kind of, we would have loved it if our product could serve every video creation needs in the world, and who doesn't like it, right? But yeah, we took some time to realize this concept of, hey, you know what, there's something called the target audience, or people call it different things, right? Ideal customer persona and whatnot. But we took a while to figure out that, hey, you have to specifically focus on one target audience and then understand their requirements, understand their pain points, and then build for them. The second thing was that we wanted to build a really good product, and building an amazing product is not so easy. We had to go by a lot of gut feeling, and we had to take inspiration from some of the tools in the market which we like. For example, a few of the tools which we really loved at that time is iMovie for one, and we knew that Canva was trying to help marketers create posters very easily. So these were two big challenges which we faced, and the third one would be we were both really bad at talking to customers. I think so. I was a developer turned into a product manager. He was still a developer. I think it's not very easy to have a conversation with a customer and learn their requirements and learn their motivations. Yeah, I think that would be three things which were big challenges kind of looming around, above us. And
Wow. So those, I mean, it's really hard to face challenges that early on, but at the same, because you have no experience to really respond to those challenges, right? You're just sort of like experimenting, you're figuring things out as you go. And I'm sure, those were the early days. Things have progressed since then, but I'm sure the challenges have not stopped. So there's a lot of people that are watching these videos who maybe they've never started up, but they want to be entrepreneurs at some point in the future. Maybe they're budding entrepreneurs, want to be entrepreneurs, or maybe they're first-time entrepreneurs. They're in their first startup, but they're in the early days, right? So what's some advice or some learnings that you could share with people that are watching this video? Things that you've experienced in your own startup journey that you can sort of share with them, some wisdom.
absolutely. So I would say there are two things which kind of stand out for me. One is the fact that you eventually have to get this maturity to understand that everything which you do in a startup is an experiment, right? In fact, the startup itself is an experiment. You start off with this. So, for example, in our case, we started off with this hypothesis that, hey, creating a tool like this would enable marketers to create amazing videos. That's a hypothesis, and it need not be true, right? Where you need to kind of do the process. You need to try building it, try talking to marketers and see if it's working out, and you need to validate if that hypothesis is true. And similarly, everything which you do in a startup is a hypothesis. When you are experimenting with a growth channel, or if you are, let's say, targeting a specific target, ideal customer persona, everything is an experiment in a way. So the beauty of doing experiments in the right way is that you learn to be detached from it in a good way, right? You don't emotionally get really attached to this problem, and you're not like, hey, you know what, this tool should solve this problem. You know what, this is how I wanted it to be. You learn to become a little emotionally detached from this problem, and you'll be able to, that'll help you take decisions, not really in an impulsive fashion, but probably in a much more thought through fashion. So yeah, so that is one thing which I've learned. It took me some time to understand, but everything is an experiment. The big startups out you see out there in the market, the small ones, the things which you do in your startup, all of these are experiments, just trying to validate if they work, and you try to get better and better at conducting experiments, right? So that's one thing. The second thing is, in fact, I am also to be blamed here, right? Is that a lot of early stage entrepreneurs, for social validation, or probably because they see that this is what is happening in the market, what they end up doing is that they tend to focus a lot more on the investors than the customers. The most important problem they got to solve is for the customer, is to understand what the customer needs, talk to them, learn to talk to them, learn their motivations, what their needs are, what really keeps them going in their life, and then solving for it, right? And once you do that, trust me, investors will come behind you. You don't have to go behind them, right? So that is one thing I want to really kind of tell everyone, all the budding early stage entrepreneurs, that don't focus on the investors in the early stages. Just focus on the customer. Just try to understand what problem you're solving, and be sure that you have enough motivation to solve that problem.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that's a source of a lot of confusion in the ecosystem, especially right now where funding is just being given out left, right, and center, right? Where these investors, these VCs, they have like a quota, right? Where it's like, okay, I need to invest in like 50 startups this year. So, sounds like your idea is pretty good. Sure, why not, right? Now, there are people who would make the argument that and especially for entrepreneurs, I think, who, they have experience as entrepreneurs, they've started a few companies. Maybe right now they're at the early days of whatever startup they're working on. But I know people even who have raised funds before they even know what their product is. A lot of investors invest in the person, not the idea, not the product. It's the person behind it, right? So what would you say to that?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a investment model which has worked, right? Where you invest in a person and kind of hope that the person comes up with something very interesting. And in fact, investment in a very early stage startup also makes sense when you are trying to solve a problem which is operationally intensive, right? Where you need a lot of, let's say, capital pumped into getting some infrastructure or whatnot. It's just that not every business requires that, right? For example, if you're building a software as a service business where you provide, let's say, maybe an email client, or a better example would be, let's say, if you're providing a chatbot system, or a productivity app, a to-do list app. So a lot of these software as a service businesses, probably you have that advantage of actually going ahead and building it out first, testing it out in the market and see what's working out. What's that one thing which is standing out? What's that wow factor which is really kind of impressing your customers, talking to them. You have that opportunity. So it's always good to do that, maybe before, even spending time talking to investors and, wasting their time and your time as well, right? Eventually, when you do a startup, you end up doing a lot of experiments. You end up doing a lot of experiments on the product front, growth front. You try to hire people with a certain cultural thesis in mind and whatnot, right? You also need to be aware of the fact that you also have this learning curve where you are learning things at a certain rate. Now, what happens is if you start doing experiments at a faster rate than your learning curve, which is also, let's say, hopefully a rate which goes up, what happens is you might end up doing experiments where you really can't utilize the learnings you've got, right? And what happens is sometimes when you are too early for a VC firm, or even to get investment, and you get investment, you might end up doing a lot of experiments which might not give you enough time to evaluate and figure out whether to learn from it, right? Because your learning curve is still, the rate is lower than that. You need to understand that there is this learning you've got to go through, invest on that, use that learning to conduct experiments, get results, validate them, and then that becomes a flywheel. Keep doing it over and over. Hopefully, you will hit the gold mine someday with that. Yeah.
I think the gold mine is almost like this fantasy, right? And we hear about unicorns and we hear about companies that, you know, came up and you know, just exploded. Their growth was, you know, exponential, and it was like the founders didn't even know what was happening. Like they stumbled on the gold mine, right?
Yeah.
But it's this legend, right? It's like something that I think, you know, 99% of startup entrepreneurs do not experience.
That's true.
You know, growth is more slow. You have to work harder for it. The growth of the company and finding success is a very challenging experience, and it takes many years. So I almost, you know, I think probably the path that you guys are on is a little bit safer. It's more conventional, and probably you'll come out better because of all the learnings and the challenges that you've experienced along the way. So, you know, what's one crucial learning, like the biggest learning for you, the biggest piece of advice that you would share with budding entrepreneurs, first-time entrepreneurs? What would you?
I think you've already put it in the question itself. So I think the biggest advice I would rather give to early stage entrepreneurs would be to learn to become a learning machine, right? For example, we all have our own medium of learning. For example, some people love to read books, some people love to listen to podcasts, some people try to network with people and learn from them, from conversations. I personally read a lot of books. I try to read a lot of books, I would say. So here's the thing, right? This journey is going to have a lot of unknowns, you know, and you'll be required to take decisions without really understanding its consequences 100% for sure. You'd be really lucky if you know the consequences even 60%. So there'll be a lot of unknowns, and you'll be having to take a lot of irreversible decisions as well, right? So what would really help is if you can find your own sources from which you can learn and get much better at what you do. And that sort of a growth mindset would really take you a long way in the entrepreneurial journey. And just keep focusing on that. Keep focusing on how your team can become much better learning machines. You know, be invested in their journey, and that would make a big difference. Even if your startup eventually doesn't work, you would be much better off compared to where you started off your journey, and that means a lot, because tomorrow you can definitely start another journey, or you can join someone else's startup journey, and you would be like a very resourceful person because of the experience you've gone through, the learnings you've got. So just focus on becoming like a learning machine and keep at it.
There you go. All right, guys. If you enjoyed this video, would love it if you could share it with your network, people that you think would also be inspired by Matthew's message. And I think there was a lot of good learnings, good advice, good. Yeah, is it Gyan? Gyan is
I think Gyan is the right word.
That's the right word there. Yeah. So would love it if you could share it with your friends, family members, coworkers, or fellow entrepreneurs. And if you have any questions for Matthew about anything that he said in this video, about his startup, Typito, or about his own personal journey as an entrepreneur, we'd love it if you could leave those down below. And if there's a couple of good ones, then I will maybe ask Matthew to come back and respond to a couple of them himself.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So thanks for watching this video, guys. And thank you, Matthew, for coming on the show.
It's been my pleasure.
Really appreciate you sharing your wisdom, your insights. And again, I think there was a lot of good gyan that you shared with the audience, and I think people are really gonna,
hopefully it's helpful.
Find it valuable for sure. All right.
Yeah.
I need to get better at wrapping these videos up. I don't know I don't know what to say at the end. There we go. We're done. Yeah, we're done. Yeah. That's the problem. People are like, is it over? Like, when's the? I need to get one of those like clappers, you know? Like, okay.